Well, hello everyone, and hi, I'm John Dupuy, and this is the fabulous Nichol Bradford and the fabulous Doug Prater, and we're here live doing our monthly Spirit Tech Talks in San Francisco. And take my word for it, right out there we see Alcatraz and the Golden Gate and the sun upon the hills of Marin, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we're here with Nichol Bradford, who is one of the, the central movers and shakers in the trans technology world. And we just finished doing the third TransTech conference in Palo Alto the day before yesterday. And it was, again, it's our second time we've been there, I Awake, and it was amazing. And Nicole, you gave a great talk there. And anyway, Doug, do you have a brief bio so we can kind of get this rolling?
Yeah, well, like John was saying, Nicole was just right at the center of the transformative technologies movement and gave a really great talk the other day. So today we're going to talk to her about the TransTech landscape and some of the opportunities and challenges here in the space. Nicole is also the CEO of the Willow Group, which is a transformative tech company focused on employing rigorous scientific research to develop training protocols, hardware, and software that can produce reliable changes in our experience. Prior to that, Nicole was a senior executive with responsibility for strategy, operations, and marketing for some brands that you may have heard of, like Activision Blizzard, Disney, and Vivendi. So, Nicole, honored to be here, honored to have you here.
Thanks. It's my pleasure. I love you guys.
Well, thank you. So, I kind of know the story, but every time I hear it, it gets better. So, can you tell us how you actually?
As every good story does.
Right. It grows with the telling, right? How you went from this really kind of World of Warcraft. I've never played it, but man, I know millions of people do. And you were a part of that team or part of that development. I'm not sure what part you had, but I know you're associated with that.
No, I used to oversee operations for the China branch of World of Warcraft. So I ran the technical back end were my departments, and then also I did go to market because I had a background in marketing strategy and sales. And so it was kind of unusual to do both of those things, but I did. And I did that. I was in China between Shanghai and China for 6 years, but right at the tail end, I was moving from mainland China to a regional role. And in between that, I went on a meditation retreat and I had an awakening. And so with that sort of dramatic shift in experience and, in such a short period of time, having this intense level of happiness that I didn't really know was even possible, and a level of fearlessness that I didn't know was possible. On the other side of that, I wanted to share it with people. I wanted other people to experience it. I felt that, there was a lot of luck involved in how I had come to the process or the meditation technique that did that for me. And two, not everybody in my retreat had an awakening. So I really wanted to know, how do you use technology and how do you discover how to make this more accessible? How do you make happiness and fearlessness widely accessible? So I started out wanting to scale meditation, and then as I moved into it, then it was in realizing that not everyone's going to meditate. I was interested in scaling the benefits of meditation, which I consider to be self-awareness and the ability to connect to other people. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that's, not on the deep philosophical non-dually side, but just like basic, what you get from basic meditation, those two things. And then, and then I sort of, as I learned more about the global psychological data on happiness, stress, anxiety, depression, suicide, and all of the things, then I became really focused on a broader definition of mental and emotional well-being. And so I define that as mental health, emotional well-being, and human thriving, and using technology to support that. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got here.
Yeah, it's kind of under the school of positive psychology or authentic happiness. What does it really mean to be there? And does that mean? And what does it, games can kind of give you temporary happiness or take you into really excited kind of amazing states, but they don't last for too long.
There's a lot of things that do that. I think that the thing about transformative technology is that it is a use case for technology, in that how do we use a variety of things to support the mental and emotional well-being of humans. And so I think that in this world, my goal is for people to have what they need. And I envision that people will have a variety of tools. I don't think that, I don't believe in an all tech solution. And I also don't believe that only humans can help humans. And so, there'll be a mix, just like on certain days you do one workout versus another. People will have a variety of things that they use.
And how long have you been into this kind of TransTech movement, or was it a movement when you started? Was it even somebody naming it that, or did that just evolve when you began to do it?
Jeffrey Martin, who is my co-founder at the lab, he had developed that name, or had been come up with that name a while ago, and it's a name that people, like when we first started saying transformative technology, like people were like, "What the heck is that?" And it's been interesting over the last 3 years to see how the world is starting to catch up with us. I remember when I first started talking about it, people had no idea what I'm talking about. But now lots more people are tracking the data. And it's been interesting to see how the conference has evolved and who's coming to the conference. We're getting a lot more people that I call big HR. And so those are people who are responsible for the health and wellness of large populations. And they tend to be associated with corporate health, because the corporate healthcare systems actually, they don't want you to get sick. It's better for them if you're healthy and at work,
Of course.
and not pulling on the system. So the corporate healthcare systems are actually, or the providers who are the private insurance companies and private providers, private healthcare systems to the corporations, they are highly likely to pay for preventative healthcare. So they're paying for yoga, they're paying for meditation, they're paying for things that reduce stress and anxiety, because they're trying to, reduce the amount of sickness. So you have a situation where all of the, where the incentives are aligned. And so those people are starting to show up too, because they're looking for solutions. Like one of the people who spoke at the TransTech conference was Joe Burden from Will. And, they're a company that I think a lot of people might not really know how influential they are, but they serve, the last time I talked to him specifically about this was about 6 months ago, and I know they've done a lot of deals since then, but they serve 35 of the Fortune 500. And so they are one of the largest providers of meditation and yoga content into corporations. The last time we talked, they were serving over 500,000 people with meditation and yoga. And so a lot of people, they think, they think that some of the apps, that those installed bases are large, but it's actually like Will's one of the biggest players in the space. And so in terms of impact, it's probably one of the more important companies in the space. And then the other thing that they're doing that's allowing them to serve healthcare really well, corporations really well, is a lot of the corporations are taking sort of nudge behavioral psychology to heart. And so I don't know if you just saw that the person who is responsible, I think it's Eric Thaler, if I'm saying that right, he just won the Nobel Prize for behavioral psychology, and it was in behavioral economics. And one of his key contributions to the space was this idea of nudging, which basically means that if you put something in front of someone, you make it really easy for them, you give them a slight prompt, then they're more likely to do it. So a lot of the corporations are embracing nudge in terms of getting people to be proactive about their healthcare and their health.
So nudge is like, we're going to leave out a bowl of apples for you to eat instead of a bowl of M&Ms.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Or it's if people have to opt into something. I mean, if they have to opt out of like a healthcare thing, I don't remember which way it goes actually right now, but there are little things like, making it easy for people to access services.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to call 10 people to get into the EAP program after you've had a crisis in your family, the likelihood of people actually using that psychological support,
Sure.
which is private, and it doesn't get recorded in your HR file, but it's like completely private, done by third parties. If you have to opt into it and have to qualify for it, then you're less likely to use it.
Exactly.
But if it's a part of your package,
Yeah.
and it's there, and and the moment your manager knows something's going on, they send it to you. And then you just click a button, or you just make one call and you're already in, then you're more likely to use it.
It would be interesting if the corporations would be leading the way for enlightened healthcare. Is there any movement outside of corporations, like for the rest of us, as far as the healthcare supporting this kind of thing? I know they give it lip service at this point, but I don't.
I think I'm not as familiar with that, but I think what people are starting to realize is years ago when people would talk about the mind-body connection, many people, there are some people who felt like that was a little bit woo, but now we are starting to see like the levels of stress and anxiety, and they're through the roof. And so now it's sort of like undeniable that something is happening to people. And one of the things that I watch a lot is that, if you look at the estimation of the level of depression that's going to be happening in the world. So today, depression is the largest cause of disability. But of disability, but in 2030, it's estimated to be the largest disease burden.
That's just shocking. Of
everything, everything.
Our armed forces, this is a shocking statistic that there's more deaths in the military from suicide than there are combat deaths. And we're basically, engaged in these incessant wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, just outside, just across the board in the United States, the increase in the number of the suicide rate from 95 to 2015 was something like 24% increase. And the U.S. suicide rate's actually, lower than the developing world, I don't know what the right word to use for that these days. But whereas many people think that, there's a lot of people who think that, suicide is something that people who don't have to worry about, the certain factors, there's a perception, not mine, that suicide is something that, well-off people do because they have the luxury of being, miserable, I guess. I don't believe that, by the way, everybody. That's not my point of view. I'm about to make a point. But it's actually the global suicide rate is going up, the global depression rate's going up, the global stress and anxiety rate is going up. There was a report that I saw that was done it was done by corporations, and corporations are actually collecting a lot of great data because they have the ability to, they have the ability to get the surveys responded to. And so it was professional class, so white collar workers globally. The increase in extreme stress in China was like 76%.
Yeah.
I mean, just like incredible levels. And so I think what's happening is that people, companies, individuals, lots of people are starting to take this seriously. And there is a correlation between stress and disease.
Yep.
And, if not just, at first it's sort of like your psychological state, which affects productivity and things. But then certainly, I believe it can affect you physically and your overall health. And so, and if you look at the number of schools that create or that train mental health professionals, and you were to fill them to capacity globally in order to catch up to the 2030 estimate of just depression, it would take more time, more years. It was like several hundred years, I don't remember the exact number, to catch up, to have enough people in the way that we do things one to one to service that. And so it's like, how do you use technology to get to a place where we can create accessible, affordable, scalable means to support? And the way that we look at the world is that, on one side is what I call human support. And so that's stress, anxiety, depression, light depression, because we are very commercially oriented, in the sense that my vision is that I want people to be able to walk into Best Buy or the Best Buy of the future, whatever it is, and to get what they need. That also means there need to be things that don't require a prescription. And so probably, where we sort of like draw or have a little bit of a line, is that if someone needs constant care of a doctor, then there's other places than TransTech that are probably better for them, so that they can get that kind of focus. But, the likelihood of the average person, it's like everybody experiences a bout of depression at some point in their life, or not everybody, but many people. And so this side is sort of like light depression, stress, anxiety. The middle is what I call the human condition. So that is the human condition. So that's happiness, meaning making, connection, empathy, self-awareness. How do we know ourselves better? How do we learn to communicate with other people so that we can have, more frictionless interactions? Not, that we don't have disagreements, like we're never all going to be the same, but it's like, how do we connect to other people?
And how do we find our way in the world and know what we're supposed to be doing?
Exactly.
Just to make this personal, I've shared this, to my writings and books and talks, but my older brother committed suicide.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
And I was suicidally depressed for many years. Pam, who is one of our producers, she's off camera, but she can tell you that. She saw me go through this. And basically what saved my life is when I started using transformational technology. I had already discovered exercise, but I started meditating with holosync and insight meditations and whatever was available, 12 years ago. And it literally, it saved my life. It really changed. Big non-dual kaboom, like in the first week, and then a number of months of releasing somatically the stuff that was the trauma that was keeping me ill.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely, a total believer in this technology, and it's not just the technology, but it's using it correctly. I mean, they're tools, and a tool by inference has to be used wisely. A hammer doesn't do anything by itself, but you can get a lot of things done with a hammer. If you're going to hammer things, then you could do without it. So, this is real. You're talking about, this is not theoretical for me. You're speaking where I live.
Well, there's also another column too, which is the also increasing and expanding and enhancing mental and emotional capacity of humans. And so what's interesting about it to me is that I think it's they aren't islands. So support the human condition and enhancing humanity. They're not islands. They're actually all, it's a spectrum. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is that we do the TransTech 200, which is the list of companies that are developing technologies that, we think support mental and emotional well-being. We have the main list, we have an up-and-coming list, we have a notable mention list, as well as now we're also pulling out companies that create the ecosystem and are doing interesting things. And so one of the things that I find really exciting is that there are lots of things that work across the spectrum. And so, one of the devices that I have a lot of love for is the Fisher-Wallace device. And they're one of the only FDA approved devices for depression. And and I probably shouldn't say this online, but, a lot of people, you have to have a prescription to get it for depression, but only
in the United States, by the way.
Right, but there are people who are using it to like see how far they can go, who are not depressed. Like people are using it,
To enhance brain function.
And then a lot of the, so there's lots of things that, they have a specific use case, but then people are using them to sort of like push on the boundaries.
Yeah. From being ill to optimization of human capacity.
And it's really, when it's the same hardware and the same software with different programs, that's fantastic, because it's like this idea that you could support someone to health, and then it doesn't have to stop there. Like they could go through health into, like the next expansion of what's possible for them.
Yeah.
Mentally and emotionally.
Well, we have this thing, Integral Recovery. We have this podcast that we started about episode 40 now. It's the Journey of Integral Recovery. And in the Integral Recovery, just mere sobriety sobriety step one, it's a foundation. And then you get into the optimization of, and we've been using, I wrote about, in 2013, the book was published, but about Fisher Wallace. And I know
great.
Chip Fisher. Yeah, we're pals. And we found that using our brain entrainment stuff and Fisher Wallace for helping people in early recovery whose brain chemistry being exhausted or depressed and just beat up by the whole progression of the disease is really useful. And the thing about TransTech, and of course these Spirit Tech Talks, it's kind of taken us out of our little silo. We've been doing brain entrainment and evolving that and working hard to get that out in the world. But last year was our first time we went to TransTech, and then interviewing all these amazing people we've done has just opened us up. And it's a yes and.
Yeah.
And the more that we can work together. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I would suggest that it's all becoming increasingly more important too, because of the changing economy and the rise of automation and things. People for so long, for better or worse, and I'm not going to comment on that, have largely defined themselves through their work and their job. And as our relationship to work changes, it's increasingly important to get a sense not just of who we are and our happiness and managing the stress and those type of things, but finding purpose in some other way and using transformational technology, it seems to me, is going to be an increasingly important way to do that.
Absolutely. I talked about this a little bit in my talk, but I had this great slide, which was like, this is the exponential curve for technology, but human development is still done the way it's always been done for the most part, for most people.
What is that?
And so as a result, when you look at the skills that are considered to be the ones that are going to be required to be employable in 2030, like to actually even have a job, there are skills that are what people call people skills. Mm-hmm. And those people skills come, if you back into them, it's knowing oneself and being able to connect to other people. It's like those two things, whether it's negotiation, creativity, collaboration, all of the very human things that will not be automated, at least for a very long time. And so we actually have to become really good at being. Like our entire system is set up on teaching people how to do. Our educational system is set up to basically prepare people for factory work. It hasn't changed since it was really created. And so, there are examples here and there, Montessori and this and that, but for the most part, what everybody goes through is an archaic education system, and that's designed to help them do. And we're going to be doing a lot more being, and we're not really good at being. And with, like you said, with a lot more time on our hands than all of these other things, that are sort of, I guess you could say, the characteristics of being in one's mind a lot. Those things are even going to become like as much, without a means for scalable, accessible, affordable ways to support mental and emotional well-being, mental health, and human thriving. The numbers that we see for stress, anxiety, depression, suicide, we haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg for that. Like we haven't even seen what's coming. if we don't get a handle on it and figure out how to get around it. And then also, I think what's, beautiful and an opportunity is that the very thing that will help change the very thing that will derail the estimates and the forecast, this, mental and emotional well-being, and the things that I've mentioned before, those are the same things that will help people be employable. So finally, it's like the means for both this automation problem that's happening, and the human psychology problem that's happening, the means and the ways of thinking about creating leverageable modalities, which includes amplification. So, one of the people that I've been really inspired by, and I might have told you guys this, but I'm incredibly inspired by Gary Kasparov. Incredibly inspired. And, when he lost to Deep Blue, he didn't cry. He didn't demand that the International Chess Federation no longer allow computers to play chess. He became obsessed with AI and learning about it, and developed advocated for and developed the category of centaur chess or advanced freestyle chess. And what he found, and he gave a great TED talk about this, definitely go and look at it, it's fabulous. And what he found is that, whereas mostly when humans play AI in chess, the AI often can win because it can just calculate the probabilities. And then when a human and an AI play an AI, that human AI combination can mostly win, because, and that's what the human calling upon the AI, kind of like we call upon our phones. But when there's a combination where the human and the AI have been trained to work together, they've both been trained. So it's not just like calling up facts and probabilities from past games, but where they're really like designed to work together. The human knows how to use the AI has been trained to support a human in this way. That combination is dominant. It just dominates AI, dominates human. Like, it's just like, and so I think when I think about, how do we support as many humans as possible, I envision a future where the teachers of the world are amplified, and so that way you don't miss the human part. We don't lose the human part, but we allow them to serve as many people as possible. Because right now, like, you guys are going to the, Science and Non-Duality conference this weekend, and there's going to be, as you know, an incredible amount of extraordinary teachers there. Like, some of the best teachers in the world are there this weekend. And it's one of the reasons why it's a special place. They could teach all day, every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there are over 7 billion people on the planet. They cannot reach they cannot reach everyone. But if you could amplify them, then, perhaps you could put a dent in it.
Well, and the other thing is that these transformational technologies or spiritual technologies, as far as this tech goes, they are tools that actually help us to wake up, and it's not just, supplanting meditation, but it's giving you super tools to make your meditation much more effective. And you get there much more quickly, and it democratizes the whole process, which I find fantastic. And there's some types of intelligence, such as the deep intuitive human intelligence, that you find in playing music and art and all these, these very human things that we do that can't quite be done by AI yet. But the transformational tools themselves help us to access and stabilize those type of intelligences, which is really incredible.
Yeah, anything that decreases the noise in your head, I think, increases your effectiveness in the rest of
in
life.
A lot of ways, yeah. But you actually relax into a lot of parts of your own being that if you're all, you're all in a knot and you're all stressed out, you just don't have access to.
You just don't have access to. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, as you guys know, we also do the Finder's course. And the purpose of the Finder's course, as you know, is to help people find their fit, help people very quickly find the meditation techniques that help them the most, so that people are not wandering around. And I think, it's not just meditation, but it's also the transformative technologies. How do you help people find the right thing that works for them? Because people are what's going to work for someone could be very different from person to person. And so it's like, how do we, cut down the time that people spend wandering and searching and looking and get directly to something that actually really helps them. It's interesting. It's like, sometimes I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they were asking me about the importance of struggle. And, and they were basically saying, well, if so much of this human life is the struggle. And I said, there is a difference between suffering and struggle. Yeah. Struggle is it's the 20th rep of the third set. Mm-hmm. Struggle is the fourth job. Struggle is the night school while you're working all day and you've got kids. That is struggle. Those are very human things that are the story of our lives. And I think that struggle is, like challenge. Humans need challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Challenge is good. Suffering, psychological suffering, that eats lives. It eats lives. Mm-hmm. It eats lives. It eats families. It eats societies. And, and that is the generational trauma that gets passed down one to the next. That is the I'm not enough. That takes people away from, fulfilling their potential. It's like suffering. I don't think suffering is necessary. Challenge and struggle, I think that's a good thing. That's a part of human life.
Go ahead.
Those things really define your character, and it's part of life. But suffering is about an awakening that we chase and chase and chase, and many people never get. One of the real gifts of transformative technology in general, it seems to me, is that there's a tendency among a lot of seekers to try something and give up too soon and switch before they know, or to never quite find it. But when we're actually getting the physiological markers that tell us if we're on the right track or not, when we're sampling the practices, for example, in a way that is distributed to all of us and can really see what's working for us as individuals versus blindly following or switching too soon, then we have a lot better chance of that happening and ending that very suffering that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think, I don't necessarily know if people switch too soon, or if it's that the way a lot of people pick things is they walk into a bookstore and they pull out a book and they like the color of the book cover, or they heard a friend got a big benefit, and so they went and did what the friend did. And so it's very much like taking someone else's medication.
Sure.
It's like, and it's that random. And so that's why I'm really interested in, ways to discover, quickly discover fit for people, whether it's meditation or entrainment protocols or, whatever it is. And it's using also the physiological markers.
You have to hit enough parts. I mean, you have to cover in your practices, whatever it is, enough things, so you make sure it's getting done. And one of the things that I know you're involved in is this new process called Willow. And I spent a lot of time at the conference with Dan. I don't want to mess his last name up.
Dan Hubbard.
Hubbard, right. And we had a wonderful connection. And they're working, you guys are working on bringing meditation and fitness together, which is like what's totally saved my life. And I'm so enthusiastic about it. And when we started talking with Dan, it was just all this connection. And that's a pretty integral, holistic practice. And at this point, I think you have to work with its much intensity as you work on your body for fitness, you have to work on your interior self. And if you get those two things going, whatever practices work best for you, the inner and the outer, your interior self and your exterior self, then you get in a personal evolutionary fast lane, and you really start progressing and making wonderful progress.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Everyone has a different path and a different thing that their contribution is supposed to be. I am, for me personally, I am solely interested in scale. I am solely interested in scale. And the reason why is because I have a sense of urgency about, having an awakening, a worldwide awakening of it, more and more people becoming conscious, becoming self-aware, and increasing their capacity to connect with other people, because we have a limited amount of time to solve the problems facing mankind. And so, there are, I've come across people who are very resistant to technology, and I appreciate their point of view, and I understand where they're coming from. For me personally, it misses a little bit of the sense of urgency of the situation that, mankind is in. But I'm also not on the other side of the people who think that, the technology on its own is going to solve it, because humans are still using the technology, and we're still going to be human. And so if we, so technology without the humanity is not going to, really, it'll fix some problems, but, there'll still be plenty. And then humanity just without the technology, is not so much. And then it's also, it's another one of those things, is it's like there's a lot of people who wax poetic about some historical time where things were supposed to be, better.
Yeah. When was America great? What was that thing we're talking about?
Well, I mean, I don't even know. It's like, as a, if you look across the, the vast continent of human history, I'm a woman, and two, I'm a person of color. So, it's like, I'm not interested in the past. Like, it was never really awesome, for me. I'm interested in the future and creating a future for mankind. And I want us to have new problems. Like I think, it's like, I would like for humanity to have new problems. Like, how much time should I spend in solo consciousness versus group consciousness? Oh, I can't decide. Let's get some new problems. Or should I, should I go into stasis when I go to Jupiter or not? Let's get some new problems, as opposed to sort of like the same old.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things about developmental levels, and there's all kinds of levels that are represented on the planet, but kind of the fundamental mythic level of reality looks back at the good old days, good old religion, when Jesus was with the disciples, or when Muhammad was with their blah, blah, blah. They're trying to get back to this golden thing that exists. And of course, I think now we're realizing that like you said, we're going to have to progress to and create this new reality. And the exciting thing is we're starting to get the tools to do that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things too is that people, because bad news is sort of like bad news is on a different time scale than good news. Mm-hmm. And so I talked about this in my talk, but, by most major objective measures, life is better than it's ever been.
Right.
Yeah. The number of people who are not living in poverty, the infant mortality rate, the girls' education rate, the number of people who have electricity, it's just like it's like it's better than it's ever been, but people don't really see that because we're not really designed, or the way that our amygdala works is it looks for the bad news. And that goes back to meditation, which is one of the interesting things. I'm sure you guys have seen some of the studies and brain scans that are showing the effect of meditation on the amygdala and the decrease of the fear center. And so, I certainly experienced that, when I came out of my retreat, that first retreat with the awakening, I was someone who, if you had asked anyone if I was happy, and if you'd asked me, I would have been like, I'm totally happy, because I had, the glass was half full. Like, I mean, I was always like, I always saw the silver lining in things, never really kept that much of a grudge. I mean, I had a few things here and there, but like for the most part, happy. I thought I was happy. And I also, felt pretty fearless. I moved to China by myself, didn't speak the language, biggest job I'd ever had. And, and a history of jumping out of planes, trapeze. I had, 2 amateur fights. I used to, I love combat
MMA?
sports. No, just boxing.
Boxing. Oh.
But I did do a little bit of Thai boxing.
Can you show me your left hook? I'm kidding.
And so, many people would have said like, oh, Nicole is pretty fearless. But the difference between, when the Vipassana retreat that I went on, when it lowered the noise in my head and lowered that, that incessant chatter, that rumination, that self-referential thinking, and I had all of that space, the human mind, when it's not pushing or pulling, is happy. And it's like it's not a forced happiness. It's not a cognitively designed happiness. Mm-hmm. It is just this like joy, this like inherent joy. Mm-hmm. And I had that, and I had this decrease in fear, which, I realized, there's like fear is, when you're in a dark alley, fear is a very good thing. Mm-hmm. Like it certainly has its purpose. But, I think in much of human life, there is this sort of existential, low volume fear mm-hmm. that is like just below the surface. And that's what went away for me. And, and it was amazing to me that 10 days later, you could have that you could feel that way, that you could have that kind of experience. And so that's why I changed my life. Like the number of people who changed their lives after retreats, it's pretty funny. Because it's like you suddenly experience this sort of way of being that was right next to the old one. Like nothing in your life has changed, like I wasn't suddenly married, and I didn't suddenly have kids and any of those other things that I wanted. But I just like was really happy and unafraid, and like wanting to create and share that.
Yeah, and you also had a new sense of direction in your life. You changed what you were doing and started working towards.
But it's all coming back. It's all coming back together. I think that the great thing about what games represent is human beings love stories. We're story-driven creatures. So before we had the ability to write, we told stories, and so it's very much a part of how we're wired and how we pass on an understanding of who and what we are. And so you might have seen some of the different studies where when people are in an fMRI and they hear, let me tell you a story, regardless of the language. So people have done these studies in like different languages. When a human being hears, oh, there's a story, our brains light up in a different way than when someone says, let me tell you the plan. Like it's completely different. And so they really resonate with us. And so the thing about games is that they like the story matters a lot to us. And so when you're looking at, why people stop using wearables or why they stop doing certain things that are good for them, I think one of the reasons why wearables go into a drawer after 4 months is because when it is unattached to a story in someone's life, and that story could be a story about themselves, about something that they want to change, but they've like really tied it into a narrative of their life. When things are unattached to stories, we lose interest in them very quickly. And I think, the story is the thing that ties it. So I, ultimately envision that a lot of this TransTech is going to be integrated into narratives.
Yeah. And community.
Yes.
It's
hard. You're right. That's the other one.
It's hard doing this in isolation, but when you're a part of something, you belong to something that is part of that story. It's like, it's not the lone hero, but it's the lone, it's the collective hero or shiro, if you will, that's doing this together. And not only is it a good story, but I think there's a collective feel, an actual palpable, energetic something that's created when we all begin to work on ourselves in these ways and use these technologies to transform, to get happy, to get creative, to find our gifts and to give them back.
I totally agree.
Nicole, I want to ask on the topic of story, and as someone who is so immersed in this industry and so knowledgeable about it, what does the next chapter of our story look like? What are you particularly excited about, and where are we going?
Well, one of the things that I see, some of the things that I'm the most excited about in TransTech, I think like one of the things that's going to happen is that a lot of the sensors are going to go into the background. So there's a type of technology called, or a category of study that's called ambient technology. And that's kind of like how there's positive computing and effective computing and all of that. So ambient technology basically means embedded systems. Mm-hmm. And so, there are, I have seen, there are real devices out there. A lot of it's coming out of MIT, where remote sensors, so sensors on the wall, are able to pick up biodata with the same efficacy as on-skin sensors.
As a wearable,
just
from a distance.
Yeah,
wow.
I've even seen, there was a guy at CES last year who actually had remote EEG.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like I don't know exactly how that one works. I'm not going to say, because I haven't seen, I haven't dug into the science behind it, but he was at CES. But, definitely a lot of the stuff coming out of MIT, there's, remote biodata, HRV, there's really interesting things. And so I think a lot of stuff is going to go into the background. So you're going to see sensors moving into the background. You're going to see, so people don't have to remember to put it on their body. You're going to see sensors consolidating. So like one of the companies that was at the conference was Interaxon, which has, they're the people with the headbands, the consumer EEG headbands. Well, they have a pair of glasses that they've just brought out where they've taken all of those sensors plus a gyroscope plus an accelerometer plus heart rate and the EEG, and it's in a pair of Ray-Ban like glasses in terms of shape. Now, I mean, they're not little fashion glasses, but still that you could get all that stuff into something that people use regularly, so you don't have to have an additional.
So it's like it's a biometric neurofeedback thing that's all in a pair of glasses, and and you use them
and
for
reading
a session.
glasses.
And reading
No, these are your reading.
You use these.
Yeah, you wear these glasses all the time.
And the data's there, and it just shows you what you're doing, and you learn to kind of control it as you go about your.
They're not really doing entrainment with it. It's
monitoring. but it's showing you how to.
Right now, it's monitoring. Yeah. And their use case for that is elderly populations, and especially people who are who have various conditions that will show up in sort of like an EEG wiggle, to use not a very technical term. So like people with Parkinson's or other people who are having things that come with episodes, to be able to monitor them. And so things are going to go into the background. Things are going to get really consolidated. People are going to start subscribing. At some point, people subscribe to moods. So like people will subscribe to focus. People will subscribe to calm. People will subscribe to happiness. They'll subscribe to compassion. And then all of these things, the lights, the sounds, the smells in their homes and the spaces that they're in. The other thing that I'm really interested in is like one of the reasons why we did the Willow thing with the meditation and fitness is to be where people are. I think that, it's the idea of the third and the fourth place. So first place is your home. Second place is work or school, depending on where you are in your life. And then people have room for a third place. That third place can be their gym. It can be where they socialize. Most people don't have room for a fourth place. What's interesting about driverless cars is those like when we move into automated cars, the car will become a fourth place because you still have to move from one place to the next. And so then those spaces are going to become, maybe it's where you get entrained.
It's already my fourth place.
Right.
I don't live in Palo Alto, thank God. No, I mean, it's very crowded, dense. We live in southern Utah, so I drive big, vast open space. I train all the time in my car, and I don't call it meditation because, but it is awareness and mindfulness, and I get very clear. And sometimes I get my best ideas, and it's just all.
See, imagine if you
time.
didn't even have to drive, like you didn't even have to be responsible for this like 2-ton piece of steel
I've got
hurtling
such
at
control
60,
issues. It's going to take some
60
real
miles
work
per
for me
hour.
to let
Like,
that computer take over.
Right, but when it does, it's like we're going to use the cars for. They're going to be places where we do education. They're going to be education spaces.
Right, you don't have to just sit there.
Yeah.
Once
so
I trust that some bitch to get me,
right,
and it'll take a while.
Then so that's this idea of the fourth place. So right now it's really hard to get people to do a fourth place.
Yeah.
And so what we did with the Willow product is by going into the third place, and approaching people who. Already, if someone's in a gym, they already believe that things are trainable.
But anybody who lives
And
on
then
the
you just go
101
right there.
corridor has got a fourth place. You spend a lot of time in traffic around here.
Right,
sitting
but
in
you
cars.
should be paying attention to the road.
I know, but can you? Right, okay. I got one more thing. I want.
That's what one should be doing.
I got one thing I want to check in with you. And one thing that's become very, important for us, and we've noticed through the process just of the interior contemplative meditation that's facilitated by this technology, is that flow states begin to come out. And there was this book called Stealing Fire. Came out, big book.
Love those guys.
And love those guys too. And we noticed that. I noticed that in my talking, my interviewing, my playing music, my writing. The more I meditated with this technology, the more I became accessible flow states. And Doug just created a thing called Stealing Flow. It's a whole suite it's kind of a new break for iAwake because it's not an interior kind of thing. And we kind of danced around that before, but it's like 5 tracks, and they're
6.
I use them every day. 6, sorry. I don't count very well. But when we get in these states that are just amazing, and before meditation had been, our practice had been more about kind of, just focus on that which is beyond all states that arise and all this stuff. That was kind of the traditional teaching. But now we're doing that interior work, but we're also helping people reach these incredible states of flow and creativity and genius, superpower, however you want to say that. And a lot of our popular fiction now is all about nerds like me and you and Doug over here finding their superpowers and figuring out what to do it and going out and change the world. That's a big, important myth. And to get into these flow states, and I think this technology is taking us there, that more of us can be more creative and more dialed in and doing our own, genius work in the world, whatever field that's in. And that is a huge part of human happiness, to know that you are in the center of what it feels like you were born to do. And it seems like you're being played or used or becoming a vehicle of some kind of higher energy or higher wisdom or higher power. That's such a beautiful thing. And that's one of the promises of this field that we're in with the transformational tech, if you want to comment on that.
Well, I think that, I feel like I feel like every lost gift, I think every human being has a gift to give. And I feel that every lost gift, I feel it in a tangible way. I think that every person that we lose, and especially the ones who are lost to unnecessary suffering, mental and emotional suffering, I think that's a tangible loss to mankind because, we have so much potential and we are so extraordinary. And I think we haven't even really seen the beginnings of what we can do. And a little bit earlier, you were talking about collective intelligence. There was just a guy, I was just reading a book about it from it was actually a very analytical book. It was the guy who wrote Rational Individual. And he was talking about how, we have this myth that intelligence is about a single person, that a single person's intelligence. But he was talking about collective intelligence. And, and he one of the funny quotes was that he said that if you had 100 people with moderate IQ working together, they would accomplish way more than 100 geniuses who don't work together. Just because of this, like the power of collective intelligence. And so, what I think of when I also think of the work that all of us are doing, what you guys are doing at iAwake and at, Spiritual Technologies is, it's support the human condition and then expanding the mental and emotional capacity of human beings. And so the wonderful thing is that we get to work on all of it at the same time.
Yeah. And we almost have to work on it all at the same time.
Yeah, but also because the same tools work across the spectrum often.
Doug,
Nicole, I have a question here from Emilio Goldenhirsch. He asked, how could neurofeedback stimulation plus AI enhance human development potential?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, so right now there actually isn't a lot of AI in the world. Most of the world is databases. There's some deep learning, some machine learning, but it's coming along. And so I think with neurostimulation, and neurostimulation is also it's a developed science, but there's still a lot more to learn, about how it works and where it works. And so, one of the main places where you'll see AI intersecting with neurostimulation is, as we will need AI and the advanced computing power to actually truly understand the human brain. And then because we don't really understand it yet.
Yeah.
And so when we're able to, completely map the human brain, which will only happen with AI and even more computing power. I was at, just as an aside, I was at this, the Stanford Brain Mind Conference. And one of the questions to the neuroscientists, they had a panel of neuroscientists and like all the biggest names you can imagine. And they asked a guy, like, what's the biggest problem? And I was expecting him to mention a biological problem. And with a completely straight face, he said computing power. Which was like that, because it's like we know the computer power accelerates. And so, with the greater understanding of the brain, this is, I believe, what's exciting is I believe that this is the age of the brain.
Yes, it is.
Because the amount of money that's going into neuroscience and brain research. But it's also the age of the mind because of our understanding, what the contemplative traditions have contributed is that, whereas like there's some sciences where, where it's actually all theory, it's like people have just kind of seen dark matter for the first time. It's been theory for a very long time. With the contemplative traditions, we actually know where the human mind can go. We know that the lizard can be tamed, the inner lizard can be tamed. Like we know where we have North Stars. We know what's possible. And so what's happening, and I'm sorry, I've kind of like gone out on a tangent, but I really want to make this point. The other thing that's happening is that the massive amount of data that is now available that I believe should be turned back towards the benefit of the person. Like right now, the data that gets collected on people is used to sell them things or deny them things. That's what it's used for. But it's also like in terms of your personality, your behavior could be quite enlightening for you, or not enlightening, don't mean to use the E word, sorry. It could be, quite a revelation for you to like really understand who you are based on the data that's collected for you. And I think, it's very important to have the right privacy in place. It's one of the reasons why I'm obsessed about blockchain for medical and psychological data. Because, human memory is kind of mushy and human willpower is questionable. Anyone who's like,
the aggregate's not too good, but
eating
there's
the
some
chocolate
examples.
cake late at night, knows about human willpower. But it's like this ability to really see yourself over time, can give real insight into, your psychology. And the psychology and the mind are not necessarily the same thing, but it's like, there's this contemplative piece. There's this, power data piece. There's this neuroscience piece. And it's all happening at the same time, and coming together. And I think, with the right, it has to have the right privacy and ethical protections in place. But with that in place, we are coming into an age where we are going to be able to discover so much about ourselves. And then if you're using neurostimulation, you can use it in the right spot for the right reason, and have a real precision. And there's a lot of people doing great work out there. Focus and other people are doing neurostimulation. And they're just really at the beginnings of what is going to be possible for those devices.
Well, look, we as you see, it keeps getting darker because, well, the original light was coming through the window and the sun went down. So it's kind of really cool in a black and white Norris way, which I really like that. And I like black and white films a lot. So we've really moved into that visually. But yeah, we just done it. We just nailed it time wise.
Okay.
So Nicole.
Well, I mean, we could probably end up talking for hours, actually.
No, absolutely. And you're such an easy interview. I mean, you have to do anything and think about.
That's funny.
Anyway, so just want to, hey, blessings to everybody out there, and thank you. And yeah, let's, we're all in this together, and with courage, compassion, intelligence, and wisdom, and fun, and love, and creativity, and joy, and happiness, we can really, really get this thing going. And it's the old Chinese curse: may you live in interesting times, or maybe it's a blessing too. And I appreciate your passion for scalability of all this, because it bugs the hell out of me too. How are we going to get that, this out to the world, to everyone? And yeah, your passion for this transformation that, is a small thing now, but who was it? Marshall? No, it wasn't Marshall McLuhan. It was a woman who said it. She said, "Don't think that a small group of dedicated people can't change the world, because it's the only thing that ever has." And anyway, the group keeps growing, the circles keep expanding, and we keep making connections, and you've done a tremendous. So is Pam with your spiritual tech talks. It was hers and Louie's idea. Hey, Louie, he's our producer. He's in the Philippines right now. One of our producers, she and Pam, and your work with Jeffrey and TransTech is just changing the world. It's making a world of difference, and some of us it saved our lives. So anyway, gratitude and thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing?
You certainly may.
Okay, so what I'd like to leave all of you with is that who you are and what you do are equally important. And so especially anyone out there who is an entrepreneur, and especially if you're an entrepreneur in tech and looking at building TransTech, the contribution that you can make, your personal awakening, your personal path, it is as important who you are as it is what you do, and they're both incredibly intertwined. And especially as we move into this new age, where the tools that we build will have so much power, the ability for you to to really hold center for what it is you're creating in the world is going to be really important. So that's just my final words. And thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.